I know I've already done tons of reviews on the Star Wars saga, first in my two-part Phantom Menace video, and again in my massive Star Wars vs. Star Trek video. However, on both occasions I felt like I was simply defending the films, as opposed to giving my true opinions about them. And as far as my Star Wars vs. Star Trek review goes, I admit I was being a bit one-sided. I've always been a loyal Star Wars fan, and I always will be. So anyway, this is the last time I'll be thoroughly reviewing these movies, but I don't feel I've given each film their dues, and seeing as how they were a big part of my formative teenage years, I think it's only fitting that I cover them. Now I know, there isn't much I can say that hasn't already been said. I think the general consensus is that the true Star Wars geeks are in love with George Lucas's unaltered original trilogy. They aren't big fans of Rontos, digital dewbacks, newly inserted Jabba the Hutts, and need I say it, Greedo shooting first. And I don't have to comment on the prequels, which are widely hated by hardcore fans alike. Whenever I go to check out the reviews on Amazon, you'd be hard-pressed to find anything good about them. It's astounding to see how nitpicky they can be. But I suppose this is also a testament to how faithful they really are to the films they know and love. I've always felt that the heated prequel debates were all about nostalgia. Simply put, George Lucas waited so long between Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace that something got lost along the way. Some people feel that he spent so much time dreaming about a digital utopia that he forgot about what made fans flock to the original films in the first place. But Lucas was in his 30s when he crafted the original trilogy, and well into his 50s when he finally got to making the prequels. Something is bound to be left out of the translation. And the people who grew up watching Star Wars most likely have kids of their own. Again, this is a huge gap of time, but for some reason the nostalgia factor is still there. While I always enjoy the Star Wars prequels, they were made for a new generation. They tell a much richer story, and generally chronicle a different set of heroes. For that reason, I have a hard time feeling nostalgic about them. But like the original films, I find them immensely entertaining despite their flaws, of which there are several. It's been 11 years since Phantom Menace came out, and to this day, people still complain about the scattered storyline, two-dimensional characters, wooden acting, and a certain digital Gungan who shall remain nameless. Let me take you back to 1999. Remember, when this movie was getting ready to be released, fans were buying tickets months in advance. It was one of the first times I can recall where I heard about people literally camping outside of the theaters, waiting in anticipation for a movie that I guess was supposed to change their lives forever. Jake Lloyd's face was on everything from Doritos to cans of Pepsi. And let's not forget the teaser trailer was probably one of the most downloaded videos that year. People would actually pay $8 for a movie just so they could see the trailer and then not even stay to see the movie that they originally paid for. Don't lie, in 1999 you were probably doing it too. There was undoubtedly a lot of hype and a lot of build-up leading to its release in May. I was a sophomore in high school, and I can't begin to explain how excited I was. In those days, I didn't have a lot of expectations for a movie, but the possibility of there being a bad Star Wars movie didn't really cross my mind. I knew that it would have a lot of different characters, and that we weren't going to see Luke face off with Vader. I went in knowing that Obi-Wan was a young Jedi Knight, and at this point, Darth Vader was a 9-year-old kid named Anakin Skywalker. This was stuff that we found out early on in A New Hope. Ever since I saw Jake Lloyd in that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Jingle All the Way, I kind of questioned his being cast in the role, but I also felt that because it was Star Wars, it wouldn't matter. Let me also go on record to say that I got into Star Wars fairly late in the game, probably around the mid-90s. I grew up watching the movies, but I didn't start appreciating them until I was a teenager. But like everyone else, I always wondered what happened to the missing 3 parts of the series. Why were we only given the middle 3 episodes? It was the rumors of Lucas actually doing 3 new films that sparked my interest in the trilogy, but unlike most people, I really only had to wait about 4 years between Episode 6 and the brand spanking new Episode 1. I remember being a little confused with the opening crawl. It had familiar terms like Jedi and Galaxy, but it also dealt with the Trade Federation and the taxation of trade routes, which felt a little more like things you'd hear at a Star Trek convention. But once the movie started, I was hooked. So in The Phantom Menace, you have a trade federation that is blocking trade routes to the planet of Naboo. It's never explained why they're doing it, but the point is that the Galactic Republic is crumbling due to its being run by a passive chancellor, who sends in 2 Jedi Knights to negotiate with the Trade Federation. We also find out early on that the Trade Federation is being bullied by a holographic phantom who calls himself Darth Sidious, who we suspect will become the eventual Emperor. When the Trade Federation attempts to assassinate the Jedi ambassadors, Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi, escape to the planet to warn Queen Amidala of an impending invasion. To keep her people from starving to death, the Queen decides to plead her case to the Senate, hoping to resolve the conflict. Of course, the real Queen Amidala disguises herself as a handmaiden named Padme, played by Natalie Portman, while her decoy pretends to run things. Now, in reality, this is a sound concept, but in the realm of fantasy, this really shouldn't have been a part of the story. It just confused me, and I never understood the purpose of it. Yes, at the end of the movie, the Queen tricks the Federation by using her decoy, but I felt it was just a cheap plot device that didn't work very well. Anyway, on the planet, the Jedi meet the most hated Star Wars character of all time, a Gungan named Jar Jar Binks.
Excuse me!
And in the midst of fighting some poorly trained droids, escape the Trade Federation's blockade and end up on the desert planet Tatooine, where they meet a gifted slave named Anakin Skywalker.
I'm a person, and my name is Anakin.
Played by an annoying Jake Lloyd. And I have to admit, he is pretty annoying, and I always wondered why Lucas wanted to start the character off so incredibly young. It would have been a little more plausible to see a 15-year-old flying around in that ship than a little 9-year-old with a big head who likes to shout, "Yippee!" every 5 seconds. Now, this is a part of the film that really tested the willpower of angered Star Wars fanboys and fangirls alike. They actually give an explanation for the Force, which up until this point was described simply as an energy field that binds all living things. Now we discover that the Force is actually concocted of these microorganisms called midichlorians.
What are midichlorians?
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
The more midichlorians that exist within a person, the stronger they are connected to the Force. I think it was brave for Lucas to attempt an explanation, and it becomes important in the third film when we learn how Anakin was created. Remember, he has no father, according to Shmi Skywalker. But it really is a concept that didn't need any explanation. We had no problem understanding the concept of the Force before, so this exposition really wasn't warranted. It's funny how Lucas tried so hard to make all 6 films connect seamlessly, and yet the act of having a little green Muppet lift a huge starfighter with his mind isn't enough to show us what the Force can really do. We need this explanation concerning microscopic life forms.
Even Master Yoda doesn't have a midichlorian count that high.
Now, if you can swallow down that one little hiccup, which honestly I never really got that hung up over, the rest of the film is a real joy. Anakin wins a pod race, Qui-Gon gets him his freedom, the Queen pleads her case to the Senate and fails, a senator named Palpatine gets voted in as the new Chancellor, and Queen Amidala decides to fight for her planet's prosperity. In the background, there's a secondary villain named Darth Maul, who seems to always show up at the wrong moment to throw a monkey wrench into the Jedi's plans. There are some annoying flaws along the way, but honestly, once the pod race scene starts, there's rarely a dull moment to me. The weakest parts of the film are where we're either given too much exposition, or when we're dealing with political issues, which is all of a 3-minute scene. But the action scenes are 100% Star Wars, and I'm as entertained by them now as I was back in '99. The lightsaber battle between Darth Maul and the Jedi doesn't hold up as well today as it did back then, and I could never really find a purpose for Darth Maul or Jar Jar, aside from being able to market toys to the kiddies. But obviously, you need some comic relief, and you need a chief villain. I just don't think they were as fleshed out as they could have been. I also find it slightly odd how it turns out Anakin actually built C-3PO. Seriously, it would have worked just as well had he just stumbled in from some random junkyard and accidentally walked into the middle of the action. After all, that's what happened to him in the first place. It's definitely my least favorite of the 6 films, but more because it distances itself from the rest of the series. Everyone's so much younger here, so it's hard to see anyone assuming the role of their appropriate characters. Also, if you walked into this film knowing absolutely nothing about Star Wars, it might actually confuse you more than anything, because there's more exposition here than in any previous film. It doesn't fully explain what a Jedi is or how the Senate works, and the blown-out explanation regarding the Force is a bit too much to swallow for newcomers. If anything, it targets those who are already familiar with the Star Wars universe, but shouldn't a prequel do the opposite? Of course, these, like most everything else, are just minor complaints, and are more like nitpicking than anything. I also think it's interesting that while the film is scorned by the die-hard adult Star Wars fans, I've heard that most kids really enjoy it and actually have a hard time watching the originals. That isn't to say that they have bad tastes in movies, but the mindset is altogether different. It's just more proof that the quality of a movie is more about timing and perception than anything.
I have a bad feeling about this.